We're going to have a panel of Chicago-based American Indian educators and practitioners. Our first panelist is Jolene Alec. She's a Northern Paiute, Western Shoshone, and is the program director of the Chicago Title VII American Indian program in the Chicago Public Schools. We have Lola Hill, PhD, and she is a member of the Bad River Ojibwe tribe. She is the Dean and Professor of the Medicine Shield College Program with Eastern Illinois University. Georgina Roy is the Assistant Director of Anawim Center, published writer and speaker, and along with her sister, are the only Ojibwe language instructors in Chicago. Ken Scott, he's Choctaw and is the Executive Director of the Chicago American Indian Health Services. We have Doreen Weesey, White Earth Ojibwe, and is currently the president and adjunct faculty member of the Eastern Illinois University, the Medicine Shield College Program in Chicago. And finally, last but not least, Luis Delgado. He's the member of the Oneida Nation and is the founding member of the Native Americans in Philanthropy. Please give a warm welcome to our panelists. All of our panel members are going to talk a little bit about the area in which they work and how it impacts Chicago American Indians today.
I just wanted to say thank you, Tasha and Doreen, for hosting this wonderful conference. If we can give them a little round of applause here. And Dr. Fixico's talk was so important, and I share Susan Power's sentiments that it was important to share the history of Chicago. Well, my name's Jolene Alec. I'm Northern Paiute. You may know Sarah Winnemucca and Wavoka. That's the area that I'm from. Historically, they're very important figures in the advancement of American Indians in this country. I'm married to a First Nations Ojibwe, have a young daughter. I think they're on their way. And I'm a student at Northeastern. I'm studying inner city education. And through that, I'm learning about the histories of education in the cities and throughout the country, and reading a lot of works about the abolitionist thought and some of the things that Dr. Fixico mentioned. What I do here in Chicago, my talk is more in the present time. So I manage a program through Chicago Public Schools. It's a formula grant. And basically what we do in our program is that we provide services for American Indian families in Chicago. And all of the students who are in our program are enrolled members. We have a form that actually stipulates that they have to be enrolled members of tribes, so they maintain ties to their communities on the reservation. So one of the important things about our program is that we don't let them forget about those important pieces of history, and we want them to maintain their tribal status, and also acknowledge that that's an important piece about history, that they're in the cities, however, but they come from other places in the country and the First Nations. For me, as an educator, I really want the children to understand that piece, because without it, we're not, in my opinion, we're not part of a Chicago urban. I'm Paiute, I'm from Nevada, and that's where my ties lie with this country. So these are things that I try to instill with our children, that these are important pieces of our history, and that, you know, there's other people that might not know their history because of situations. We have important programs like the Illinois Child Welfare Program here in Illinois. We find children who have been relocated to different families based on some different things in the country that have happened. But we mainly want to make sure that tie is very strong in our program. We provide academic resources, we provide cultural programs, and mainly we foster and nurture the relationship between the school district and the family. There's been a very, I don't know if it's the right word, but it's a hurtful sort of history in the education sense. There's been, I don't like to use the word, but it's historical trauma based from the boarding school eras, and also just not being able to control the way our children are taught. And to this day, we do have a lot of different things that still happen for our children in the public schools, where the families need our support. They need our support with finding the best opportunities for their children, because we do expect our children to go through the system and get the best education possible. And I think a lot of our families do have that expectation all the way through advanced degrees. So now we have a lot of American Indian families that do pursue their advanced degrees and have that expectation that they find the best school in Chicago public schools. As Dr. Fixico mentioned, that Carlos Montezuma was a Chicago public school graduate. And he's an excellent example of a person in our history that has excelled in education. So that's one of the things that we really try to focus on, is maintaining that tie, nurturing, and helping the families really understand that they have within Chicago Public Schools somebody to come to find out about programs that can help them along the way, because Chicago's the third largest school district and it's a huge bureaucracy. I don't know if many of you know this. But it's definitely one thing that we strive for within our program. We have 3 staff members, all American Indian, enrolled members of their tribes, and they focus on academics, academic achievement, finding the selective enrollment schools for their children, for other people's children or participants' children, finding high school opportunities, and also finding scholarship opportunities for the families, because that's also another misconception, that all American Indian children go to school for free after their high school. And some tribes offer great scholarships, sometimes they don't. My tribe's one of them, so I did have to pay for some of my education. But I'm going to continue on, and that's not a barrier. There's just a lot of opportunities for us out there. So I guess my part is mainly we have a lot of work to do because we are not ingrained in Chicago City. We want to make sure that our families have resources. So a lot of the talks I do out there with city organizations and different things is just to let them know we're here and our families do deserve services. And we also want the services delivered in our own way. We want them to be provided for our families and not as just an inclusive piece of just the way Chicago delivers services. We would like to maintain, our ties and also have that commonality, as he spoke about earlier, is that we want to ensure that we have a place to visit, and we have friendly faces in other institutions like Chicago Public Schools or any of the universities that have Native American support programs. So a lot of the one thing that we are pressing is also having our families write their own stories, write their own history. We have a writing project, and it's kind of coming out to be about the families and the parents wanting to share their story and how it affects their children today. So there's many, I think with a lot of the partnerships you see here, we're doing a lot of innovative things to get that story out. And these children all have ties to the reservation, as I mentioned. I think my time is up. I think I had 5 minutes or back there. But if anybody wants to get more information, I have a little pamphlet over there where you can put your name, and we send out information via listserv through the internet. And also we have newsletters and stuff like this. You can go to our website and just download. So there's many ways you can find information about the Chicago Public Schools Title VII program. And there's many different programs you can attend that are public and open to everybody. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Lola Hill, and I want to echo Jolene's kudos to Tasha and Doreen, and I loved your talk, Dr. Fixico. Now, I want to say one thing about Fixco's talk. He starts with the relocation in the 50s, but I want to make the point, and Susan Power well knows this, there were many American Indians here in Chicago before the 50s. My mother among them. I'm going to go back to the 30s. My mother and her sister from a large family, 12, 14 kids, and a great many of them came to Chicago in the 30s. And also Montezuma was here, but I want to mention an organization that was the Indian Council Fire, because Dr. Fixco is perfectly right. We sort of seek each other out, and so it happened in the 30s, and the American Indian Center, as you know it today, wasn't active, but they did have an organization called the Indian Council Fire at that time, and my mother used to take me there. I remember as a child, they used to rent ballrooms in the large hotels downtown, and they would have powwows. In the day of Chief Whirling Thunder, Winnebago, and Marion Gridley, and going way back there. And I was telling one of the people, my cousins used to come up from Bad River and go to the B-29, which was, quote, an Indian bar, 600 North Clark Street. So there was a lot of activity prior to certainly the relocation, but a lot of the American Indians also came in during the war years. My cousins, for example, were all soldiers, sailors, Marines, and were well into Chicago, in intertransport to their various bases. So I just want to make that point, that Indians have been here. Oh, and then of course forever, Susan, we were here before anybody colonized Chicago. But I mean, even the more modern day Indians were here well before the 50s. I just want to make that point. Anyway, but after that, so then as a child, I was raised in Chicago, and Dr. Fixco was talking about, the assimilation. You probably wouldn't have been able to tell me any different from my friends. I always tell my kids, I said, well, I grew up Irish and lived in the zoo, and that's pretty much it. I was in an Irish neighborhood. I learned how to do the Irish jig, and I know I wasn't Irish, but anyway, I have many, many Irish friends who also were immigrants at that time. Like my mother came in from the reservation. In a way, she was an immigrant from there. And all these Irish people came in. So I was sort of raised with the Irish on the Lakeview side. And the way I lived in the zoo, we used to go down to see Bushmen all the time. And I remember in high school one time, the guys, when Bushmen died, they all stood up in unison and bowed to the east, and much to the librarian's dismay. But at any rate, so I have been educated in the Chicago Chicago schools, and I want to give kudos here to Jolene, who is in the trenches as we speak, dealing with K through 12. Dealing with K through 12. And I've worked with her, delightful children. She hangs in there and has all these programs with them. So at any rate, what I've done after I reached my educated years, so to speak, I have been teaching, and I've taught here forever. And down the road here we've got Louis Delgado, and I think Terry Strauss has left, but sort of like a joke, everybody's been a dean at NACE College, which is Native American Educational Services. Louis was a dean, Ken was a dean, and we've all been teachers. Terry Strauss was a dean. I don't think Jerry Shangru is here, but at any rate, but I want to talk about NACE and its value. And then, and I see Sharon Taylor over there, okay, and a lot of faces that have come out of NACE. What NACE was, and instituted probably in the 70s, along with Owaiowa and Little Bighorn. And I was connected with Owaiowa along many years ago. And so at any rate, what it did, I'm out of time.
Oh, no.
I'm just getting started. Okay. Okay. All right. Let me try to close up here. Okay. So no. So I just wanted to make the point that our students are people that probably would never have gone to the University of Chicago, would never have gone to UIC or DePaul or Northwestern. And I'm going to explain it. I'm going to, hopefully I'll have time to just dwell on, as I end, one of our graduates. But at any rate, and so I always felt, well, maybe I'm not teaching UIC, maybe I'm not teaching at University of Chicago, but I'm teaching the real people, the people I love and the people I connect with. So at any rate, it's been a privilege for me. And so I, on my little bio here, I'm an English teacher, but I teach history and everything. And so I've taught at NACE forever. I taught at Iowa. And now what's happened, NACE has been gone, about 5 years now, something like that. And so our wonderful Doreen Weesey here, when NACE closed, we had about 10, 12 students. Oh, and we're not dealing with 150 students. We consider if we have 10, 15, 20, I think at NACE's height we had, 30 some? That was about the maximum. So at any rate, when NACE closed, we had about 10, 12 students left who are in between their college degrees. So what to do? So what we did do, and Doreen Weesey was very instrumental in this, we partnered with Eastern Illinois University. And so today, the organization AIAI, it's sort of funny too, because Robert Mill, you say AIAIO, and so at any rate, but AIAI stands for the American Indian Association of Illinois, right? And we are partnering with EIU. It's like a continuing education program. The students get their bachelor's degree in general studies, and they go on, like most of them, like Jolene's going on to graduate work, and it's wonderful. So at any rate, and weekend classes, and we still have, 15 to 30 students, give or take, any semester in their weekend semester. So anyway, I feel privileged to work there, but I know I'm running out of time. So what I want to bring up and end with really is really what we do. We do things that the University of Chicago cannot do, that UIC cannot do, DePaul, Northwestern cannot do, because our students are people, as I said, who would never go to those schools. They come to us, and we launch them on their way into educational society where they can be anything they want. Okay, and a lot of the leaders in the Indian community are graduates of NACE, and are graduates of AIAIEIU. Anyway, so one of our graduates, and his name is Robert Miller, and I hope I don't start crying here, but Robert, I'm going to do this. Robert started out at NACE, and he was one of the students caught when NACE closed. So, and Robert had many hard times, and however, he triumphed. He graduated 2 years ago, wasn't it? 2 years ago now. And that summer, he dropped dead of a heart attack at the powwow. And the greatest tragedy is, here he had graduated in June, and I'm going to read a few of his words here. He wanted to help Indian people. He wanted to go into the community. But for whatever reason, we don't understand why things happened, that wasn't allowed him to do. So anyway, I had a poetry class one time, and Robert was in it, and I just want to get, I'll continue after. Okay, all right. Let me just, okay, I'll make one point. Let me just read one of his poems. Okay, all right. This is the mindset of the students we have before they triumph and graduate. And he wrote this poem, he calls it The Back of the Bus. And he says, the driver yelled, "Step to the back of the bus." I caught her tired, menacing, evil eye in the mirror. "Step to the back of the bus, please." I moved without haste, slithered and snaked my way to the back of the bus. Colors and shapes surround me as I try to reach the rear. Gingerly, I step to avoid the bags and feet of those lucky enough to have a seat. The barricade of bodies slowly parted to reveal the end of the line is the back of the bus. I grab the pole and swing into line. Don't remove your backpack and put out my eye. Shout at your friends outside, it's only my hearing. Turn up your MP speaker, I like the music too. Poke me with your umbrella, it's all in fun. Here at the back of the bus. What's that I smell? Is it cheese? Is it musk? Or is it I? Or is it all of us here at the back of the bus? Okay, so that's Robert, and for whatever reason, he's no longer here with us, but I just want to read some of his thoughts, and then I will conclude, sir. My story is a long one with many ups and downs. The opportunity to further my education came about, okay, thank you. Following job losses and a reflective self-evaluation of my future. Entering college presented the prospect of pursuing a dream for me. I took my first step toward a bachelor's degree in 2005. Of course, 2005 he was caught, when NACE closed. I shook off the "am I smart enough" and the "can I do this" doubts that blocked my path toward higher education. In pursuing my dream, I have had the opportunity to meet many others than myself. And, I want to end on that point because the many others like himself are the people we have in school. And also when Doreen, I want to make the point, but we need help, okay? So consider that University of Chicago. So anyway, I'm going to shut up now. Turn to what? Okay.
Turn it this way.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. It's a little chilly here. Just feel the breeze. Miigwech. My name is Georgina Roy. I'm from the First Nations, Ontario, Canada. Born and raised on an Indian reservation. I have 2 sisters and 5 brothers. And, I was raised by my grandmother, also my aunts. There's a lot of families surrounded me. So I've been molded by a lot of people, or seasoned, I guess you could say. I witnessed my dad work in the community as a leader, band council, and he was also a counselor of people just trusted him. They just came to our home. And I was the ears. I remember families coming to our homes, As young as I was, I knew that I wasn't supposed to repeat what was said in our home, And these people, I saw them in our community, and I knew some of their stories, But at a very young age, I knew this was very important, So I was being molded, I believe, ready to one day to reveal my gift. So what I did is when I arrived here in Chicago, I arrived here in the 70s, but I did visit in the 60s. My mom had, and my dad had separated, so my mom came to the city and she didn't speak a word of English. And she worked for people that were from our reservation. She started by ironing, babysitting, and doing small jobs, but taking it really seriously, you know. And then one day my brother decided to take her to a factory, you know, and all you have to do is repeat this job, you know, coil winding is what she did. So my mom worked at this factory for 25 years. How many times was she promoted? A lot of times, but she kept saying no, 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 because my mom never learned how to read or write. And so she stayed at that place, but every day people would teach her some language. And I often went to the restaurant with her, and even I didn't know my mom didn't know how to read or write. I was so surprised every time we went to the restaurant. Mom, you know, what would you like to eat? She looks at the menu, she goes, hamburger, hamburger, everywhere we go, hamburger. I told her, Mom, aren't you tired of hamburgers? Don't you want something else? And she says, I know this restaurant has to have hamburgers. She goes like that, because, you know, and that's when she told me she didn't know how to read. So from that day, I would read her the whole menu. So I knew that education was very important for me also, because I struggled too as a child growing up on our reservation. I grew up, our reservation was, I got to see the horse and buggy days on our reservation because the time was really slow. And the schools, I didn't go to residential school, but our schools were run by government and also by religious communities. And I did write a story, and it's about witness to racism. And I was put down many times in school, not only myself, but the students I went to school with, shamed, and a lot of them were silenced for many years, you know. So this is also the community I work with, people that are in public schools like that, like I was, and also in residential schools. I married a man that was, as a survivor of residential school. So did my sister, married a man that was, their brothers, were married to brothers. And then it affected us and our brothers, our families, and we kept it a secret from our family for many years. We didn't tell our kids that our husbands went to residential school. You know, until they start asking questions about why isn't Dad affectionate towards us, you know? Indian men, they're like, that I know anyway, they're not touchy people, you know? But, so anyway, we told our kids about our husbands going to residential school, and they have this love and hate relationship too. Not only my husband, my family, but the community also has this love and hate relationship with the church. And this is where I'm involved in. I am so involved with the church. I am working on my master's on pastoral studies. And soon to be, hopefully, the director of the Anawin Center, where I have prayed, Kateri, yeah, formerly known as the Anawin Center. It is the Kateri Center now, and we chose Kateri because she's a role model for our people, one of the first that have found balance with the Native ways and the Catholic ways. And she is going to help us heal. And we have a lot of programs, and this is a new place. We had just moved recently, a few months ago, and we're at St. Benedict's, 3938 North Levitt, and it's a convent. What is kind of ironic, growing up, I wanted to be a nun. And in my essay, I wrote I wanted to be this nun, but at least I'm in the convent now, but not a nun. I can't be a nun. So a lot of wonderful things have happened at our center in our partnership with our community, you know. And like Dr. Hill says about, and Doreen also, we have a community that is so close. We are family, we are brothers and sisters, and we have helped journey, we have supported each other. We have fed each other many ways, and not only by food, every way you can think of. And so there's more to happen. This is just the beginning. Our journeys are going to take us far and far. And I did write a couple of little notes. We are the conscience of the community. This is what I always say. What is the Cattery Center? I always say, well, we're the conscience of the community, you know, so. And we have elders come there, we tell stories, we share stories, and there's a lot of healing happening. There's a lot of brokenness. I don't like to keep talking about brokenness, but I like to talk about healing one another is what we're about. And this is the first time the Chicago Archdiocese is going to have a Native person and total Native staff. This is huge. This is a big step forward, and not a religious leader. And there's a lot of resources at the Archdiocese we could share with our community and to help our programming. And prayers are answered in our community. We prayed many times with Grandma Peggy. When we left our center at Lawrence and Sheraton, I said, these prayers on the wall, how do you take these prayers from the wall? You can't scrape them off, you know. But like Robert Miller, he was one of ours too. He played music for us, and he was a big part of who we are today too. And all these people that have passed in our community, their stories are sacred to us, and they are here with us. And it's very hard for me to write. Lola could tell you that because she was my teacher. When I would write these essays, I couldn't leave out the future, the past, and the present. I would put them together, you know. And then there was always we. If non-native teachers would read my essays, we. Who's we? Did you forget to introduce another character? That's one of the things I was told many times, that's who we are, we. And then the Anishinaabe part, the native language. I just came from a conference in Canada, and with Jolene, my sister, and my husband, and we had a wonderful time. My ears danced hearing the language, surrounded by people that looked familiar to me, and it was just so beautiful. You know, I missed that, you know. In any way, this language to be delivered through songs, through music, through education, whatever we can find, this little time. Doreen had just invited me to go teach at AI this time, and I'm looking forward to that. So please come to the language class, because that's who we are, Anishinaabe Mun. We are Anishinaabe, so come hear the language. Miwa. That's it. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ken Scott. I'm Choctaw from Oklahoma. It seems that I was destined to be an urban Indian. But before that, before I even start, I failed to address some important items. First is I want to recognize Miss Susan Powers. Susan, you are one of our elders of our American Indian community in Chicago. I appreciate you. That what I say this morning, I want to be as accurate as I can. I don't want to embarrass myself in front of you. You are appreciated. I'm not an elder. I'm an older. So that I want that to be clear. I'm not an elder. I'm an older. So that there's other elders in our midst here today, and I want to acknowledge you as well. While I don't know most of your names, I just want to say as well that I will do my best and give the right information. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate you. Then, of course, I want to acknowledge Dr. Fixico. I read Dr. Fixico's books over a number of years. He certainly is an educator extraordinaire, and I appreciate him. Additionally, Dr. Weesey, I've known Dr. Weesey for a number of years. I don't want to say how many years, but it goes back a ways. And she's always been a leader within this American Indian community, and I hope she continues. there's other folks on this panel that I certainly appreciate. Dr. Hill, well, actually, I appreciate all of them. But again, I've known one, Mr. Delgado. I've known him for a long time as well, maybe not that long. But he was one of the organizers in our community way back in 1978. He attempted to pull us all together so that we can work in a concerted effort to help the American Indians in the city of Chicago. And finally, I want to address the audience. Some of you I've never seen before. Some of you I've seen. I'm glad I don't owe you any money. You certainly have me cornered here. None of you are my bill collectors, so I appreciate that. Now, in today's healthcare with American Indians in the city of Chicago, we've seen many problems that at our health program that we need to continuously address. One of those is the American Indians have an inability to navigate the health system within the city and county of Chicago. And Cook County's, hold on, I'll get this right, City of Chicago and Cook County. We have been developing a relationship with the city, county, and the state to implement health care for American Indians. There's also a fear for Indian people who go to the health facilities because they lack the resources to pay for their care. This is a barrier to the American Indians seeking health care. Another thing is that American Indians continue, we saw this way back in 1978. We also saw it on a national level, where American Indians would go to the emergency rooms for their health care, forsaking primary care. There's a problem within the lack of continuity for health care in these regards. That we want to continuously improve and challenge by bringing healthcare education to the American Indian community in Chicago. We also have found, not only in Chicago but nationally, the providers who offer this health care to the Indian people are culturally insensitive. They don't understand. Now, I was once challenged by a gentleman in Chicago, a dear friend of mine, when I used the terminology cultural sensitivity. And if you know what that means, raise your hand. All right, one person, two people. So what it means is you recognize an individual for their unique cultural backgrounds, no matter who they are. Like Dr. Fixico said earlier, that we are. That's fast, 5 minutes. Let me speak. I know I'm from Oklahoma. I talk slowly, but I didn't realize it was that slow. But these are the kinds of things that we've found in the city of Chicago dealing with health care for American Indians. One thing that, one of the questions I believe that was asked of us is, how do we see social workers working with American Indians in the city of Chicago? And I know the young lady who posed that question isn't listening to me, but that's fine. The thing that I have been a proponent for is medical social workers working in our medical facilities. I have always asked for medical social workers to help us, but the thing is, again, we don't have the resources. Now I'll move into a conclusion. Last summer, I went to Denver, Colorado to talk about health care for American Indians for the the New Access Point grant that we were eligible to apply for, which would have given us an opportunity to become a comprehensive health center. The thing was, there was about 200 people in this seminar. When they asked how many of you are grassroots community organizations, please stand up, and there was I and a lady across the hall or across the auditorium who stood up. The Affordable Care Act that is now on the ground for us is a great opportunity. But what happens is that the Affordable Care Act is a serious opportunity, but it leaves out the community-based people such as myself and this lady across the way, simply because when they asked who else is in here, there was 198 professional grants writers. That's all they do. Now, us folks, we can write grants, but we're not professionals. So that we lack the resources. I came back and the board authorized $15,000 for me to hire a grants writer. I went to a meeting and the gentleman said, Ken, we're paying substantially more than that. $65,000. And I just felt bad that we don't have that kind of resources to fight for you, our people. And so when I look around and think that we're going to be organizing with the Illinois Department of Public Health, the Chicago Department of Public Health, and Cook County to develop a comprehensive health care program for the American Indians in the Chicago in this coming year. Another thing is that, and I'll conclude, this is my second conclusion, is that we have finally hit something right. We have a young doctor who is going to be credentialed with 2 hospitals on the north side, where she'll have admitting privileges to these 2 hospitals for American Indians. Not only that, we will be able to offer greater services once we pull these things together. Now, one of the things this is my third conclusion. The last thing that I need to say is that Dr. Rubidoux, our national director, has directed us to work with tribes. One of our initiatives is, what are you doing with the tribes in your area? How are you improving your health care for your community using the availability of tribal support? So that doesn't mean that we can go write grants to them, but that what are we doing to coordinate services with our tribes? So with that, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I'll stop right there. I'll give my last few minutes to Dr. Weese.
Thank you, Ken. We all learned a lot from your presentation. Bonjour, Anin. My Indian name is Ahuskaing, White Wing Woman. And as Ken did, I want to acknowledge those in the audience who are older than I am and ask forgiveness for speaking in front of them. And I hope that I don't say anything to offend them or anyone in the audience today. And also, I wanted to piggyback what Lola said. Indian people have been here in Illinois for over 8,000 years. And even up to and even after the 1833 Act, in which they were pushed out of Chicago by law. So we've been here a long time. There's a lot of history. Most of it is not written. It's a fascinating history. I encourage people to look into that for us and with us. I'm an enrolled member of the White Earth Ojibwe Anishinaabe Nation and grew up in Minnesota. The Anishinaabe are the largest tribe east of the Mississippi, if you include Canada. We are very, very large. I'm now the founding president of the American Indian Association of Illinois and the Medicine Shield College program with Eastern Illinois University, and I have lived in Chicago for 43 years. I came here as an 18-year-old to go to school. I didn't know anybody. I didn't come on relocation. I was a tutor at the American Indian Center when I was 18 years old under Robert Reitz, and when the center had just opened at 1630 West Wilson. So I've been involved in education in our community since that time. As Ken said, I guess I was destined to live in Chicago and be an urban Indian. Yesterday, I was visiting with Butch Deloney and Susan Power, and Butch told us a wonderful story about when his father used to go around and put cigar boxes on bars. There used to be hundreds of what we call Indian bars. And they put cigar boxes on there to collect money for the Indian people that had died and needed to be shipped home. And he would march his kids into those bars where those cigar boxes were, and he'd say, empty your pockets. Put all your money in there. And they would go, that's my candy money. We worked hard for that. We delivered groceries. We worked hard. He said, all of it. Put it all in. That's the kind of man he was. And when I thought about that, I thought, these are the kinds of values that we want to impart to our children, our students, to all the people we work with in our community. That attitude of sharing and caring for one another. Because what Ken said when he acknowledged everyone is in education especially, we need everybody to help us educate our students, get them through. When I was the director of the Institute for Native American Development in Uptown and supervised that program for 15 years, we needed everyone in our community to help those students. The drop-in center, which was a drop-in center for substance abuse people and homeless people, our students used to go there for lunch because they had no lunch money. They used to then go down the couple more blocks to Indian Health and get antibiotics if they were sick. Then they'd go a few more blocks over to the Indian Center and get some clothes if they had no clothing. And they'd go over to St. Augustine's maybe and get some food for their home. This is before really wide use of food stamps. So this was how our community has always operated together. And even before there were programs, as Susan reminds me, there were individuals in our community who cared for each other, who invited each other in to eat, who invited each other to stay at their homes. And those are the kind of values that we want to continue into our future, because we know as a people, we can't really continue in a very physical sense without helping each other. And that's how our program today, as others have mentioned, I've been in education here for over 40 years. I've headed almost every level of educational program, from early childhood into senior programs. And I think that that's the commonality. That as also Dr. Fixco said, Indian people want to be together when we want to support each other, and we do need that support. And we have seen incredible successes in terms of leadership across the country come out of Chicago. Many of the tribal leaders, people who became tribal chairmen, tribal chairwomen, heads of early childhood programs, people who went on to write policy, came out of Chicago and came out of Nace College. They learned what they knew about modern grant writing, about nonprofit management, about tribal law from their experiences in Chicago. This was a training ground for many, many people. And many of those people went back and are now serving their reservation communities. So I always say almost everyone has a Chicago story. Wherever you go, whatever tribe you visit, they will have someone in their family that came to Chicago to work, to go to school. And that was because we had so many jobs here. We had thousands and millions of factory jobs, and that's what sustained Indian people. But now those are gone. So we're in a new era, we're in a new time when people need higher education and even more education than they had. But that funding for those programs came to us in the 70s and left by the 80s. It was not even a 10-year window of funding that we had, in which we developed our own schools, elementary, secondary schools, early childhood programs, clinics, colleges, Nace College, job employment programs. You name it, we had it. But then just as fast as it came, it was gone. And as there's a new book coming out, it's going to be about reimagining Indian country, reimagining it to include the people who live in urban communities and rural communities and suburban communities, because we live everywhere, and we're still living on Mother Earth. My uncle, Leon Mike, used to say, it's just a change of address. It's just a change of address. We haven't changed. Today's urban Indian will be tomorrow's reservation Indian. Tomorrow's reservation Indian will be 2 or 3 years down the road, the Chicago Indian. Because Chicago has always been a place of incredible resources, an incredible meeting of people, an exchange of ideas, and really a recreation of who we are as multi-tribal people. So I would like to see us reimagine our future, reimagine it in a way that includes all of our people wherever they live. And so that we can come together, and as Susan has said in her beautiful article that she had this week in the Tribune, that we can all move forward as a race of people, that we don't leave behind our homeless, our uneducated, our people who are handicapped, who are in some way or another, who are disadvantaged, who have special needs. Because right now, that's what's happening. All of our people in the urban communities, almost all, are being left behind. And so we want to change that. We would like to see a policy change in Washington that would allow for us to have a voice, that would allow us to have an agenda where that we would be have all those areas of concern covered for us. There are thousands of Indian people, wonderful people who have lived in Chicago. I want to just mention some of the family names: Ortiz, Power, Panezza, Malater, the Red Clouds, the Deloneys, the Lemirs, the Delgados, the Pilchers, the Clara Kraus, the Strauss family, the Batiste family, the Jordan family, the Harpers, the Bearskins, the Yellowbanks, the Aikens, the Ketches, the Muskokamans, the White family, Beverly Moser, Sharon Skolnick, Edith Johns, and Marr, and thousands of more incredibly wonderful Indian people have lived here and have helped all of us here get to where we are today. And I think it's important to mention them. So as Susan was saying, we cannot forget them. They are our history. They may not be rich in the white sense. They may not be famous in terms of, modern, what we read in the textbooks, but we need to celebrate them and to celebrate our history, because this is all we have. This is our history, this is our culture, these are our languages, and all this, everything that is happening today in Chicago is happening everywhere, all around the United States, in reservations and suburban communities, as I said, in rural communities. So I just, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I wanted to mention of the leadership, the time of Renaissance that we've, and that when we developed those programs in the 70s and 80s, those were the first time ever in 500 years that Indian people had ever been allowed to develop their own programs. So here we were, not even college graduates, barely out of high school. We were writing federal grants. We were managing high schools, colleges, elementary schools, and because no one else, there was no one else to do it. And so, well, it was a great opportunity. It was it was very difficult as well. So I want to call upon all of you to work with us to reimagine a new Indian country that is rich in our traditional values, the values of our ancestors, and together so that we can imagine a better world for our children and our elders and generations to come. Thank you.
I found it's tough always to follow Doreen. There's so much good things to say and share with us. I'm one of those, probably one of those urban Indians that we've been talking about. I was born in Chicago, but my family, my parents, my mother and father came to Chicago in the 20s and 30s. They provided that network of support that the relocation program relied on, actually, to help settle people once they were here. They created some organizations. They provided a network, a support network that helped people when they came to Chicago to settle in more easily. And so I think that's important, as you heard other panelists say, it's important to recognize that. It's also been a learning place, as Doreen mentioned, for a lot of folks. My brother also was raised in Chicago, but he returned to Oneida, Wisconsin, our reservation, about 20 years ago. He's now on the tribal council out there. He's on the governing council, and he uses a lot of the skills and knowledge about organization and community development work to help develop the tribe out there. So as Doreen said, a lot of leadership has been created here in Chicago that goes on and does some very important work nationally. I've been involved with organizations, as you've heard, for almost 40 years, like Doreen here in Chicago, developing education programs, schools, community organizations, providing various types of different services. And one of the key takeaways for me has always been the observation that they're under-resourced, that they struggle trying to get the kind of resources, funding that's provided for a lot of groups, but very little is provided to Native people. And so there's a constant struggle to try and keep these organizations going. In 1986, after doing about 15 years of school development work here in Chicago, I was invited to join the Macarthur Foundation and served there as a program officer, where I worked for several years. And it was a tremendous learning experience, but I also had the opportunity to participate and develop two special grant-making programs that supported Native people both here across the country as well as internationally, supporting some indigenous groups from Alaska down to the tip of South America. But one of the things I've learned through my experience is that philanthropy in general is, as a system, really does not, its failure as a system is deeply embedded. And it takes a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot more work to try and turn that around. In 1988, I attended my first Council on Foundations conference, which was held, I believe it was in Toronto. And to my surprise, there were only 3 other Native people in the entire conference. This is a conference, the Council on Foundation is the trade association of foundations. So it really epitomizes the wealth of this country. There were about 2,000 people, 2,000 funders at that conference. There were 4 of us, 4 Native people in attendance. Only 2 of us came from what I would consider well-endowed mainstream foundations. And looking at the agenda, there was only one workshop on the entire conference agenda related to Native people. And it focused on the image of Native people in children's textbooks. Now, I know that that's important, but it's really not the first thing that you would come up with if you asked, for example, the people at this panel, what should philanthropy, what should all the foundations in America know about you? I think there's quite a few things we could come up with that might be more important than that. So we decided, the 4 of us, to begin a process by which we could change things in philanthropy, that we needed to develop a presence, a Native presence in philanthropy. And so we went about the work of identifying Native people that were affiliated with foundations across the country and held a meeting here in Chicago in 1990, January of 1990. I remember it was a cold day. But we had about 30 people that were Native people from around the country that came together to talk about philanthropic issues and really the gap that exists between foundations, the foundation world, and Native people. In preparation for that meeting, we commissioned a research study which looked at the level of giving going to Native people and Native causes. We examined, in the research report, examined 400 foundations, including 100 of the nation's largest foundations, and tried to assess what level of giving they were providing to Native people. In that study, we found that less than 0.2% of all the money they gave out were reaching or serving Native causes. Wow, that's much time already. I have half my time gone. Less than 0.2% went to Native people. That means 99.8% of the money had no relationship or bearing on Native people across the country. In addition, a significant amount of that money went to non-Native controlled organizations who purported to do things on behalf of Native people. So organizations that we're talking about here that are controlled by Native people and doing things grounded in the community really weren't getting funded. They weren't getting the kind of support that was necessary. So we formed, from that meeting, we formed what's called Native Americans in Philanthropy. It continues as an organization today to try and improve funding and increase the presence of Native people within the philanthropic arena. Subsequent research, and we try and promote additional research to continue to look at the level of funding going to Native people. Subsequent research had in the 1990s, following that meeting, a very slight increase to about 0.3% of the funding. And then in the 2000s, it grew a little bit more to 0.4 to 0.7% of all the money going out there went to support Native causes. Unfortunately, according to a new study that's going to be released this coming week at a Native Americans in Philanthropy conference, which looked at 1,400 foundations across the country. In the last year of the decade, 2009, Again, only 0.3% of that money is reaching or serving Native causes. And that, again, includes a lot of money that's going to non-Native organizations who say they're doing things for Native people. Now, I understand 2009 had a significant economic decline, and you would expect to see foundations, as had occurred, because of the economic recession, they all cut back across the board in funding. However, the drop in funding for Native people was over 30%, whereas in general, it dropped 14%, and among all foundations in the country, it only dropped 8.6%. So why the disproportionate drop? Why is it that Native organizations don't get the kind of support necessary, and as soon as there's an economic crunch, we just fall off the table? Other findings showed that of the 1,400 foundations, 1,149, or 82% of them, gave absolutely nothing at all, did nothing related to Native people. Now, I would say we need a change. Something has to happen. Fortunately, in terms of the interest areas, education was receiving the most in terms of the proportion of money. However, and that's good news to people at this table. However, there is still this lack of resources going to Native-controlled organizations, which are doing, again, the kind of work that's being done and talked about at this table. Closer to home, the story is even worse. Within the study, within the 1,400 foundations, there were 50 foundations studied in Illinois. Of those 50 foundations, they gave away $782 million, almost $750,000 across the board to everything. Only 17 grants were made for Native causes across the country. 17 grants out of $782 million went to 11 Native and non-Native organizations. That totaled, the 17 grants total less than $1 million. Somebody else can do the math here. You run out of zeros in terms of the level or percentage going to Native people. And further, in Chicago, the impact in Chicago was zilch. Only 3 grants went to 2 Native organizations in Chicago, totaling $115,000 out of that $782 million that goes out the door from Chicago and Illinois foundations. That's incredible, and it needs to change. So what can be done? I would recommend foundations, obviously, begin to support Native organizations and programs at a higher level. The rate that they would have to increase that level of giving just to be comparable and equitable on a population percentage base means that it would have to increase at a rate of 5 times what they're currently giving. It's the same rate of increase that we called for in 1990 if you were going to just look from an equity standpoint about how much money needs to be increased in order to be equitable. Another recommendation I have for foundations is they should increase their knowledge about Native people and organizations and understand how Native interests coincide with their interests, mission, and purpose. There are many organizations that can help with that learning, including Native Americans in Philanthropy and people in this room that are doing good work on the ground in Native communities. Native organizations, on the other hand, in the community, can do some things too. I think there's a real need for a campaign to conduct greater outreach and cultivation of foundation personnel, informing them of local work that's going on. And they need to examine community fundraising practices to determine where the lack of connection is occurring and why are proposals being submitted and turned down? Are they being submitted at an adequate level? What's the follow-up like? How are foundations being targeted, et cetera? I would say that there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of room for growth. We need to see those foundations that do nothing begin to do something, and we need to see those foundations that do something do more. Thank you.